Today, we have a very special story for you. Claire was dicing the onions finely, exactly the way he liked them. For 10 years, she had chopped onions just like this into tiny, almost translucent pieces, because David had once casually mentioned that large chunks ruined the flavor. She had memorized that fact during their first month of living together, and had never chopped them differently since. 10 years of finely diced onions, 10 years of Thursday night pot roasts, 10 years of iron dress shirts, and a hot dinner ready by 7 p.m. She wiped her hands on a dish towel and glanced at the wall clock. It was 6:32 p.m. David usually got home at 7, sometimes half past if he was held up at the office. Over the last 2 months, he had been held up more and more often. Claire pulled the gourmet mushroom lasagna out of the oven, transferred it to a beautiful serving dish, and placed it on the dining table, which was draped in a festive tablecloth. 10 years was no joke. She had bought this specific tablecloth just for tonight, crisp white with delicate embroidery along the edges. On the table sat tall taper candles, 2 wine glasses, and a bottle of the exact same Cabernet they had served at their wedding. It had taken Claire 3 days of calling different liquor stores to track it down. She sat down on a chair and waited. The house was quiet. Their 8-year-old daughter, Penny, had fallen asleep just before 7, exhausted after her ballet class. Claire had intentionally put her to bed early so she could spend the evening alone with her husband. She had put on a dress, the navy blue one she was wearing when they first met at a mutual friend's birthday party. She'd had to take it to the tailor to get it taken in, though. Over the last 10 years, Claire had lost weight, not from dieting, but from nerves. At 6:45, the front door clicked open. Claire smoothed her hair and smiled. She had rehearsed this smile in front of the bathroom mirror while Penny was at dance practice. The smile was supposed to look light and carefree, as if she didn't know a thing. As if her entire world hadn't flipped upside down a month ago. David walked into the kitchen. He looked exhausted, the top button of his shirt undone, his tie loosened, dark shadows under his eyes. Though, those shadows weren't from working overtime. Claire already knew exactly where they came from. "Oh," he said, noticing the set table. "What's all this? Happy anniversary." Claire stood up and took a step toward him. 10 years, David." He blinked, then pinched the bridge of his nose. "Right, 10 years. Listen, today I made your favorite mushroom lasagna. And the wine, remember? It's the same vintage we had at the wedding." David looked at the bottle, then at the lit candles, then at his wife in her navy blue dress. Something flickered across his face. Not joy, not gratitude. It was irritation. Fleeting, quickly concealed, but Claire caught it. She had caught everything over the past 30 days. She had learned to read his face all over again, like studying a foreign language. "I'm exhausted. Give me a break," he said, tossing his leather briefcase onto a chair without even looking at her. "Let's celebrate tomorrow. My head is splitting." He brushed past her, his shoulder bumping hers, and that was when she smelled it, a sweet, floral scent, completely foreign. Not her perfume, she wore a warm, woody scent that David himself had bought her for her 30th birthday. This scent was different. It was light, young, brazen. Claire stood in the middle of the kitchen, but no tears came. She had run out of tears 3 weeks ago, weeping the last of them into a bath towel, biting down on the terry cloth so Penny wouldn't hear her from down the hall. Now, a cold, hard glint flashed in her eyes, one that David didn't see because he hadn't bothered to turn around. He was already turning on the shower in the master bathroom, trying to wash off the scent of another woman, completely unaware that washing it off was pointless. She knew. She had known for exactly 31 days. Ever since that Tuesday, when she picked up his jacket from the dry cleaners and found a crumpled restaurant receipt for 2 in the pocket. That evening, David had claimed he was grabbing dinner and drinks with his coworker, Mike. Claire had called Mike the next day, lying that she needed to reach David about an emergency. A confused Mike told her he hadn't seen David outside of the office in a week. From that day on, Claire began gathering facts the way one gathers apples, in an orchard calmly, methodically, placing them into a basket. She checked his iPhone while he was asleep. The text thread had been deleted, but David had forgotten to clear his recently deleted folder. There lay the messages from Jessica. Claire read every single one, No hysterics, no trembling hands. She read them the way she would read a quarterly financial report at work, attentively, mentally highlighting the key points. Jessica worked in the marketing department. She was 26, and she called David by a ridiculous pet name that Claire couldn't even bring herself to repeat in her own mind. For a month, Claire stayed silent. For a month, she smiled, cooked dinners, ironed his shirts, and kissed her husband goodnight. For a month, she incubated a plan that was set to detonate the following morning. It wasn't a plan for revenge. No, Claire didn't consider herself vindictive. It was a plan for justice. She blew out the candles, put the untouched lasagna in the refrigerator, folded the napkins, hid the festive tablecloth back in the linen closet, and poured the expensive Cabernet down the kitchen sink. The entire point of that bottle was to share it. Drinking it alone felt pathetic, and Claire had no intention of being pathetic. Not tonight, not ever again. She walked into Penny's bedroom. Her daughter was fast asleep, hugging the plush teddy bear her father had bought her for her 5th birthday. Claire sat on the edge of the mattress and brushed a strand of hair from her daughter's face. Penny looked so much like David, the same dark eyes, the same stubborn chin. Claire stroked her head and felt a tight knot form in her chest, not from anger, but from fear. She knew that tomorrow would change everything, not just for her and David, but for Penny, too. That fear was the only thing that could have stopped her. But then she remembered the smell of cheap floral perfume on her husband's shirt, and the fear receded. Claire stepped out of the nursery, closing the door quietly. David was already in bed. Turned toward the wall, he didn't ask why she had cleared the table, didn't apologize for his rudeness, didn't even say goodnight. She lay down next to him on her half of the California King mattress, which seemed to grow wider with every passing month. She lay with her eyes open, mentally running through every step of tomorrow morning. The manila envelope was already in her leather tote bag. The paperwork was ready. The only phone call she needed to make would happen at 8 a.m., the moment David pulled out of the driveway for work. Tomorrow, he would understand everything, but it would be too late. Claire closed her eyes. For the first time in a month, she fell asleep quickly and peacefully, like a person who had finally made a decision. On David's nightstand, his phone screen quietly lit up. An incoming text message. The name, Jessica. Claire didn't bother to look. There was no need. She already knew everything she needed to know. The morning began with silence that's specific. Heavy silence when everyone in the house is still asleep, but you are wide awake. Claire lay there, listening to David's steady breathing, counting down the seconds to his alarm. 5, 4, 3. The iPhone chimes sliced through the quiet. David blindly smacked the snooze button, rolled onto his back, and stared at the ceiling. Claire watched him through half-closed eyelids. He lay there for a minute, then sat up, rubbed his face with his hands, and reached for his phone. His thumbs flew across the screen. His face softened just barely, for a fraction of a second, but Claire caught it. Over the last 31 days, she had become an expert in his micro-expressions. "Good morning," she said in an even voice. David flinched and quickly put the phone face down. "Morning. Have you been awake long?" "Just woke up." He nodded and headed for the bathroom. Claire got up, threw on her robe, and went down to the kitchen. Coffee, scrambled eggs, whole wheat toast. The morning ritual, executed on autopilot. She cracked 2 eggs into the skillet and suddenly thought about how, over 10 years, she had cooked roughly 3,500 breakfasts for this man. Thousands of eggs, bowls of oatmeal, pieces of toast, thousands of morning greetings. And it seemed not a single one of them had ever truly been appreciated. David walked into the kitchen, already dressed. Dark charcoal suit, light blue shirt, striped tie. Claire used to love this corporate look of his, sharp, put together, confident. Now, she looked at his perfectly pressed shirt, her handiwork, and thought about how she was ironing clothes for a man to wear while driving to see another woman. "Listen," David said, pouring himself a mug of black coffee and sitting at the island. "About last night. I'm sorry. I really was just exhausted. Let's go somewhere this weekend. To that steakhouse downtown? Remember, the one we went to last New Year's?" Claire set his plate in front of him. "Of course, let's go this weekend." She smiled. It was that rehearsed smile, the soft, understanding smile of a wife who didn't suspect a thing. David visibly relaxed. He always relaxed when she smiled. Over 10 years, he had grown accustomed to Claire understanding everything, forgiving everything, accepting everything. The convenient wife, reliable, predictable. He inhaled his breakfast in 5 minutes, kissed her on the top of the head, a habitual, automatic gesture, and left. The front door clicked shut. Claire stood in the middle of the kitchen, listening as his footsteps faded down the porch steps. Then she walked to the window and waited until his BMW pulled out of the driveway. That was when she pulled out her phone. The first call was to her attorney. Victoria Hayes, Esquire, a family law specialist recommended by her friend Rachel, who had gone through a brutal divorce 2 years prior. Rachel had told her back then, "If you ever need it, call Hayes. She isn't the type to hold your hand and cry with you. She's the type who gets the job done." Claire had called Hayes 3 weeks ago, and they had been preparing the paperwork ever since. "Victoria, good morning." "Yes, everything is proceeding as planned." "File it today." "Yes, I am absolutely certain." "Thank you." The second call was to Rachel. "Claire, hey, how are you holding up?" Her friend's voice was warm and anxious. "I'm fine." "Rach, could you pick Penny up from school today and keep her at your place until the evening?" "Of course, sweetie. Are you sure you're ready?" "I'm sure. I'll call you later." She hung up and opened her tote bag. Tucked between her wallet and makeup bag was a large, heavy manila envelope bearing the law firm's logo. Inside was the divorce petition, certified copies of David's text messages with Jessica, printouts of bank statements showing that over the last 2 months, David had spent an amount equal to 3 months of Penny's ballet tuition on upscale restaurants, boutique hotels, and a local jewelry store. Also inside was the proposed division of assets, drafted so meticulously that David would have to think long and hard before contesting it. Claire wasn't cruel, but she was a CPA, and she knew how to crunch numbers. The deed to the suburban house was in her name. Her parents had helped her buy it as a wedding gift. David's car was financed with a loan he was still paying off. The summer cabin upstate belonged to his mother. They had no massive joint savings because David had always spent his bonuses freely, while Claire had funneled her savings into a $529 college fund for Penny, registered solely under her name. She walked through the house. She picked up Penny's scattered crayons, fluffed the throw pillows on the living room sofa, and peeked into the master bedroom. The bed was unmade. On David's nightstand lay his forgotten iPhone charging cable. Claire picked it up to throw it in a drawer. Then she changed her mind, took it back out, and placed it exactly where it had been. Let it sit there. Let everything look completely normal when he came home tonight. At 8:30, she drove Penny to elementary school. Her daughter chattered the whole way about ballet, about her friend Chloe who learned how to do a cartwheel, about her art teacher who gave her a gold star for her drawing. Claire listened, nodded, and held her little hand just a bit tighter than usual. "Mom, Dad didn't say goodnight yesterday," Penny said suddenly. "Is he mad at me?" Claire crouched down on the sidewalk, in front of the school, and looked into her daughter's eyes. Dark, just like David's. Observant, 8-year-old kids notice far more than adults give them credit for. "Dad was just really tired from work, sweetie. He loves you so much. You know that, right?" "I know." Penny nodded. "What about you? Are you tired too?" Claire hugged her daughter, hard and long, burying her nose in her hair, which smelled of strawberry shampoo. "Just a little bit," she whispered. "But I am perfectly fine." Penny ran toward the heavy school doors, turned around, and waved. Claire waved back, standing there, until her daughter disappeared inside. Then she got back into her SUV, placed her hands on the steering wheel, and allowed herself 30 seconds. 30 seconds where she just sat and breathed. She didn't cry. She knew the tears were gone. She just breathed, gathering her shattered pieces back together before facing what came next. The courthouse and Victoria Hayes' law office were 10 minutes away. Claire parked, grabbed the envelope, and walked in. Victoria Hayes was waiting for her in her office, a lean woman in her mid-50s with a sharp bob and piercing eyes. "Have a seat, Claire." "Coffee?" "No, thank you. Let's get to business." Hayes nodded approvingly. She liked clients who didn't waste time weeping in her office. You can weep at home. Here, you work. They went through every document. Claire signed the petition. Her hand didn't shake. Hayes noticed this and raised an eyebrow slightly. In 20 years of family law practice, she was used to trembling fingers and smeared mascara. We'll file the paperwork with the county clerk today, Hayes said. David will be formally served within a few days. Are you prepared for his reaction? I'm ready. He's going to call you. Most likely, he'll start by screaming. Then he'll try to beg and negotiate. Then he'll pivot to making threats. It is the standard playbook. I know. Are you absolutely sure you don't want to go stay with a friend or family member for a while? It is my house. I have nowhere else to go and no reason to leave. Hayes nodded again. She pulled a pristine business card from a silver case and wrote a number on the back. This is my personal cell. If he tries to pressure you, call me. Day or night. If he ever raises a hand to you, call 911 immediately, and then call me. Understood. But David isn't the type to get physical, Claire said, surprising herself by defending him. Habit. A 10-year habit is hard to break. She walked out of the law firm at 10:30. The morning sun was blinding. It was a regular weekday. People were walking down the sidewalks. Cars were honking at intersections. Somewhere in the distance, children were laughing. Claire stood on the pavement and thought about how the world hadn't changed by a single millimeter. She had just initiated a sequence that would obliterate her family, yet the world kept spinning as if nothing had happened. Her phone rang. It was David. Claire froze for a second, then answered. Claire, are you home? I forgot a thumb drive in my other briefcase in the closet. I'm not home, but I'll be back soon. I can look for it. No, it's fine. It's not urgent. I'll grab it tonight. Where are you? Running errands, she said calmly. Ah, gotcha. All right, see you later. He hung up. He didn't even ask what errands. He used to ask. A lot of things used to be different. Claire got into her SUV and drove home. On the way, she stopped at Trader Joe's and bought groceries for dinner. Chicken breasts, potatoes, fresh herbs. Tonight, she would cook dinner just like always. David would come home, eat, go to sleep, and in a few days, his entire world would collapse. She loaded the grocery bags into the trunk and suddenly caught her reflection in the tinted glass of her car. A 34-year-old woman with dark circles under her eyes and a tight, thin line for a mouth. She was beautiful, but that beauty had become hardened, as if frozen in ice. Claire looked at herself and didn't recognize the woman staring back. That girl in the navy blue dress who had laughed at a birthday party 10 years ago and fallen in love with a tall guy with a charming smile, that girl was gone. In her place stood a woman who knew exactly what she had to do next. And this woman was no longer afraid. The evening went exactly according to script. Claire roasted the chicken and potatoes, fed Penny, whom Rachel had dropped off right at 6, and helped her daughter with her math homework. David came home at 8, ate his dinner in silence, grabbed his thumb drive, and shut himself in his home office. Claire put Penny to bed, read her a story about a lost bunny trying to find its way home, and walked out, leaving the star-shaped nightlight on. Everything was completely normal, as if nothing had happened, as if the manila envelope wasn't already sitting in the county clerk's office, waiting to be processed. The next 3 days dragged by agonizingly slowly. Claire went to work. She was an accountant for a mid-sized commercial real estate firm, crunching other people's numbers and managing other people's taxes. Right now, that monotony acted like a sedative. Numbers didn't lie. Numbers didn't smell like cheap floral perfume. Numbers balanced out exactly the way they were supposed to, and there was a reliability in that which no longer existed anywhere else in her life. No one at the office knew about her personal life. Claire wasn't the type to gossip by the coffee machine. She smiled, drank her iced lattes, discussed quarterly projections, and didn't let a single word slip that her insides had been entirely hollowed out. Only her friend Rachel knew, and her lawyer, Victoria Hayes. On the 4th day, a Thursday, David came home earlier than usual. Claire heard the front door open, heard him step into the foyer, and heard him stop dead for several seconds. Then came the rapid, heavy footsteps toward the kitchen. He appeared in the doorway holding a thick legal envelope. His face was ashen. What is this? Claire stood by the stove, stirring the pot roast. Thursday, pot roast day. Why don't you read it? I read it. David's voice cracked. He threw the envelope onto the granite island. You filed for divorce? Are you serious? Claire turned off the stove and faced him. She was perfectly calm. She had been preparing for this exact moment for 34 days. Serious? Have you lost your mind? Over what? Because I forgot our anniversary yesterday. You forgot it 4 days ago, David. And this isn't about an anniversary. Then what is it about? He took a step toward her. What is this? Explain it to me. Claire looked into his eyes. The very same eyes she had fallen in love with 10 years ago. Dark, deep. Back then, they were warm. Now, they were panicked. Not guilty, panicked. That is an important distinction. And Claire filed it away. Jessica, she said quietly. One word. 7 letters. They hung in the air between them like a suspended blade. David froze. For a split second, his face went completely blank, like a TV monitor losing its signal. Then the feed came back online, and Claire watched an entire spectrum of emotions cycle through. Shock, anger, shame, anger again, a desperate attempt to pull himself together, and total failure. I don't know what you're talking about, he finally managed. You do. I read your text messages. I saw the receipts. That jewelry store downtown, David? You bought her a diamond necklace that costs as much as 3 months of Penny's ballet tuition. He opened his mouth, then closed it. He collapsed onto a bar stool, heavily, as if his legs had given out, and scrubbed his face with his hands. Claire had seen this gesture 1,000 times. It was what he did when he had no idea what to say. Claire, please. Don't. Don't bother explaining, making excuses, or lying. I've played every possible version of this conversation in my head over the last month. It meant nothing. I was confused. She threw herself at me. I ran every single scenario, and not a single one of them changes a thing. David snapped his head up. Something was glistening in his eyes. Maybe tears. Maybe fury. A month. You knew for a month and didn't say a word? Yes. And you cooked my dinners? And ironed my shirts? And smiled at me? Yes. That's not normal, Claire. That's psychotic. She tilted her head slightly. Psychotic is coming home from fucking your mistress and telling your wife to leave you alone on the night of your 10-year anniversary. He flinched, as if she had struck him across the face. Silence settled between them, thick and suffocating. From the living room, they could hear Penny's voice. She was talking to herself, playing with her dolls. Both of them looked toward the hallway, and the exact same emotion flickered in both sets of eyes. Fear for their daughter. What about Penny? David asked hoarsely. Penny stays with me. The house is mine. I filed for child support. You're not going to let me see my own daughter. I didn't say that. You can see her. According to a legally mandated custody schedule, arranged through our attorneys, David stood up, paced across the kitchen, and stopped by the window, gripping the edge of the countertop. Claire saw his shoulder muscles knotting up, his knuckles turning white. I won't sign it, he said darkly. I'm not giving you a divorce. Nobody is asking for your permission. We live in a no-fault state. A judge will grant the divorce, whether you agree to it or not. It's just a matter of time. He spun around. You calculated all of this? Every single detail? Yes, just like I do at my accounting job. Debits and credits. Did everything balance out? Perfectly. And the balance sheet is not in your favor, David. He opened his mouth to retort, but footsteps echoed from the hallway. Penny stood in the kitchen doorway in her teddy bear pajamas, looking at them with wide eyes. Are you guys fighting? She asked quietly. Claire's expression shifted instantly. She smiled not the rehearsed icy smile, but a genuine, warm mother's smile that triggered automatically whenever she looked at her child. No, sunshine. We're just talking. Go back to your room. I'll be right there to read to you. Penny looked at her father. David was standing by the window, facing away. Claire could see him straining with every fiber of his being to compose his face so his daughter wouldn't see his panic. Everything's fine, Pen. His voice was rough, but he turned and managed a strained smile. Go on. Penny padded away down the hall. Claire looked at David one last time. You can sleep on the couch in the basement, or at your mom's, or at Jessica's. I really don't care. She walked out of the kitchen, leaving him alone with the cold pot roast, the legal envelope on the counter, and a silence that was deafeningly loud. That night, David slept on the basement couch. Claire lay in their massive, empty bed. For the first time in a month, she felt neither fear nor anger, but a strange, ringing emptiness like the echoing quiet that follows an explosion. For the first week after that confrontation, David lived in the house like a ghost. He came home late, slept in the basement, and left for work before anyone else woke up. He didn't speak to Claire, avoiding her the way one avoids a deep puddle on the sidewalk. He tried to interact with Penny, but the little girl sensed the thick tension and felt protective of her mother. Children, much like dogs, don't need to understand the exact words being said. They flawlessly read the atmosphere in a room. On the 5th day, he tried to talk. He came home in the evening holding a bouquet of those stupid, generic red roses from the grocery store. Claire had never liked red roses. She preferred wildflowers, daisies, sunflowers. In 10 years, he had never managed to remember that. Claire, let's talk. She was sitting at the kitchen island with her laptop, finalizing an end-of-quarter tax reconciliation. She looked at the roses, then at him. Talk. I'm listening. I ended everything. With Jessica. That very same night, I called her and told her we were done for good. Okay. Claire, it was a mistake. A stupid, idiotic mistake. I don't even know how it happened. She was just there. And I was in a bad place, you know? Swamped at work, the pressure was insane. And at home, you were always busy. Penny, chores, the daily grind. She offered me attention, lightness. I'm not making excuses. I'm just trying to explain. Claire closed her laptop. She folded her hands on the table and looked at her husband the way a doctor looks at a patient describing their symptoms. You just said you were in a bad place. You? Do you think I was in a good place? I work full-time. I cook, I clean, I drive Penny to ballet, I check her homework. You come home, loosen your tie, and lie on the couch scrolling through your phone. When was the last time you asked me how my day was? When was the last time you asked how I was feeling? David remained silent. I'll tell you when. Never. You don't ask. You love the convenience of this house running on autopilot. Dinner magically appears on the table. Clean shirts magically appear in the closet. Your daughter is fed and put to bed. You live in a hotel, David. And I am the maid service. That's not true. It is true, and you know it. But instead of talking to me, instead of saying, Claire, I'm unhappy, let's change something. You went and found a 26-year-old girl who looks at you like you're a god, because that's easier. Because you don't have to solve real adult problems with her. You can just run away from them. David set the roses down on the counter and sat across from her. For the first time in a very long time, Claire saw something raw on his face. Not irritation, not panic, pain. The deep, adult pain of a man who is beginning to realize exactly what he has destroyed. Claire, I don't want to lose my family. I don't want to lose you. Or Penny. Tell me what I need to do. I'll do anything. She looked at him for a long time, in silence. And somewhere deep inside her, behind the impenetrable walls she had erected over the last month, something shifted. A tiny hairline fracture in her armor. She remembered him carrying her across the threshold of this house. She remembered him weeping in the maternity ward at the hospital when Penny was born. She remembered him teaching their daughter how to ride a bike, jogging alongside her, holding onto the back of the seat. He hadn't always been like this. Or maybe she just hadn't always noticed. I need time, she finally said. And I don't need roses. David nodded. He stood up, took the flowers, and walked out of the kitchen. A minute later, she heard him rustling with the throw blanket on the basement couch. Claire opened her laptop and tried to return to the tax report. The numbers blurred on the screen. The next day, Victoria Hayes called. Claire, the preliminary hearing is set for the 23rd. David was served and has retained counsel. A guy named Bradley. Young, aggressive, loves to drag out proceedings. Be prepared, he will likely try to challenge our evidence. Text messages obtained without consent can be tricky in this state's courts. What does that mean? It means we need to fortify our position. Do you have any witnesses? Did anyone know about the affair? Claire thought for a moment, then remembered. Nicole, the wife of Mike, the coworker David supposedly had dinner with. At a neighborhood barbecue a few months ago, Nicole had offhandedly mentioned that David was acting strange. Back then, Claire hadn't paid any attention. Now, she remembered every single word. There's one woman, I'll call her. Do it. Also, keep an eye on your joint checking accounts. If he starts moving liquid assets, we need to document it immediately. Claire hung up and dialed Nicole's number. She picked up right away. Claire! Hey, it's been a while. Nicole, I need to talk to you. Not over the phone. Can we meet up? A pause. Nicole was a smart woman. She instantly understood this wasn't an invitation for a casual lunch. I can. Tomorrow at 1 p.m. At the Starbucks near the park. They met the next day. Nicole walked in wearing a trench coat, holding an umbrella. A miserable autumn drizzle had started. She sat across from Claire, ordered a cappuccino, and stayed silent for a long time, waiting for Claire to begin. You knew, Claire said. It wasn't a question. It was a statement. Nicole looked down at her cup. I guessed. Mike let it slip once that he saw David at a restaurant downtown with a very young girl. I wasn't sure. I didn't want to meddle in someone else's marriage. Claire, I'm so sorry. There's nothing to be sorry for. I wouldn't have meddled either. Nicole, I need your help. Can Mike confirm that he saw them together? Nicole stirred her coffee absent-mindedly. Claire could see the internal struggle on her face, wanting to help her friend versus dragging her own husband into someone else's messy divorce. Claire waited in silence. She didn't press. I'll talk to him, Nicole finally said. But you know, Mike and David are buddies at the office. It's going to be hard for him to cross that line. I know. And I'm not asking him to testify in open court. I just need a written, signed statement. Nicole nodded. They finished their coffees and talked a bit more about their kids, the dreary weather, and a new Netflix series Nicole recommended. A perfectly normal conversation between two normal suburban women, as if one of their worlds wasn't currently splitting at the seams. On the drive back, Claire passed a local playground. A little boy was climbing up the jungle gym, his father standing right behind him, arms outstretched, just in case. The boy slipped. The father caught him mid-air, and they both burst out laughing. Claire pulled over and watched them. She thought about David, about how he used to bring Penny to this exact playground when she was 3 years old, how he pushed her on the swings, pushing higher and higher while Penny shrieked with pure joy, and Claire sat on the bench taking photos on her phone. Those photos were still saved in a folder labeled Family. She hadn't been able to delete them. The house was empty when she got back. Penny was at school. David was at work. Claire sat down on the living room sofa, right on the indentation, where David usually sat, and suddenly felt her armor crack a little more. A tiny, microscopic fissure, but enough for doubt to seep in. She pulled out her phone and scrolled back to the old photos. Their wedding, their honeymoon in Hawaii. David holding a newborn Penny, his face looking simultaneously ecstatic and terrified. A video of Penny's first steps, with David's voice in the background. Come here, come to Daddy. That's it. Good girl. Christmas morning. The three of them by the tree. Penny in an elf costume, David wearing a ridiculous Santa hat. Claire closed the photos and placed the phone face down on the coffee table. No, she wasn't going to change her mind. Photographs were the past. The stench of cheap perfume was the present. She needed to think about the future, hers and Penny's. But the crack remained. And Claire knew David would try to pry it wide open. That evening, as Claire was tucking Penny into bed, her daughter suddenly asked, Mom, why is Dad still sleeping in the basement? Claire froze. The towel she was using to dry Penny's post-bath hair hovered in midair. Dad's back hurts, sweetie. His doctor told him he needs to sleep on a firmer mattress. How long does he have to sleep down there? I don't know, sunshine. We'll see. Penny frowned. She looked like she wanted to say something else, but changed her mind. She pulled her comforter up to her chin and closed her eyes. Claire turned off the lamp and walked out into the hallway. David was standing there. He had heard everything. She walked right past him without saying a word. That night, for the first time in a long time, Claire couldn't sleep. Not out of anger, but because of the question her daughter had asked, the one she had no answer to. How long? She didn't know. She didn't know anything for certain anymore. With 10 days left until the court hearing, David began to change. Claire watched this transformation with the extreme caution of someone testing their weight on a frozen pond, unsure if the ice will hold. He started coming home exactly at 7 p.m., just like he used to in the early years of their marriage. He would take off his shoes, hang up his coat, walk into the kitchen, sit at the table in silence, eat whatever she had cooked, and wash his own dishes. Then he would go to Penny's room, read her bedtime stories, help her with her spelling homework, and just talk to her. Claire could hear her daughter laughing through the drywall, and that laughter hurt worse than any insult. On the third day, he fixed the leaky faucet in the guest bathroom that had been dripping for 2 months. On the fourth day, he built the IKEA shoe cabinet in the mudroom, the one that had been sitting in a flat pack box for weeks because he didn't have the time. On the fifth day, he picked Penny up from school without being asked, and they came home with ice cream cones and a helium balloon. Claire knew this was a performance, a dog and pony show for the impending custody battle. He wanted to look like the model father, the model husband, a man who had recognized the error of his ways. Hayes had warned her about this. They all suddenly turned into Bob the Builder right before a hearing. But what tortured Claire was that this performance had a very real, very captive audience. Penny was blossoming. She followed her father around like a shadow, showing him her drawings, telling him all about the drama at recess. David listened attentively, with genuine interest, asking follow-up questions. Claire couldn't tell if he was acting or not, because she remembered that he used to be exactly like this, in the very beginning. Before the routine, the exhaustion, and Jessica, he used to be the kind of father any woman would dream of having for her child. On the 6th night, after Penny had fallen asleep, David knocked on the master bedroom door. Claire was lying in bed with a paperback novel, though she hadn't read a single sentence in the last hour. "Can I come in?" She nodded. He walked in and sat on the edge of the mattress, not on his side, on the very edge at the foot of the bed, like a guest. "I started going to therapy," he said. Claire put the book down. "I found a guy myself. Had my first session yesterday. Recommended by HR at work. I'm not telling you this, so you'll feel sorry for me or change your mind. I'm telling you because I want you to know." She remained silent, waiting. He asked me a simple question. "When was the last time you were truly happy?" And I couldn't answer him. I sat there like an idiot and couldn't remember. Not because I wasn't happy, I was. With you, with Penny, but I stopped noticing it. It became like air. You breathe it and you don't even think about it until you start choking. David paused and pinched the bridge of his nose, his habitual gesture. "I'm not asking you to forgive me. I know what I destroyed, but I am asking you to think about it. Not for my sake, for Penny's. She didn't do anything to deserve a broken home. Don't you dare." Claire's voice turned to ice. "Do not dare use our daughter as leverage. That is incredibly unfair. I know it is, but it's also the truth. She asked me today why I was sleeping on the couch. I lied to her, just like you did, and it made me sick to my stomach. I felt physically ill, lying to her face. You certainly didn't feel physically ill, lying to my face about Jessica." He flinched. Every time she said that name, he jolted as if he'd been hit with a cattle prod. "I did. Every single day. I would come home, and I hated myself. But I couldn't stop. Do you understand? It was like rolling downhill with no brakes. Everyone has brakes, David. You just chose not to use yours." He lowered his head. He sat there for a long time, a minute, 2. Claire stared at the back of his neck, at his dark hair showing its first signs of graying at the temples, and she felt the crack in her armor splintering further. She was furious with herself for it. Furious at her own weakness, at the fact that 10 years of marriage isn't just a number on a calendar. It is thousands of invisible threads that cannot be severed with a single stroke of a knife. "Leave," she said quietly. "I need to sleep." He stood up. At the door, he turned back. Claire, I quit my job. I put in my notice and found a position at another firm. Just so there isn't even a chance. So there is absolutely zero contact between me and her. Nothing. Ever again. The door clicked shut. Claire lay in the dark, staring at the ceiling. He quit. He left the firm where he had worked for 6 years, where he was highly valued, where he made excellent money. He walked away from it all just so he would never see Jessica again. This was serious. This was a much bigger deal than a fixed faucet or an assembled IKEA cabinet. She called Rachel in the morning. He quit his job. Claire. Rachel's voice was cautious. You do realize this could just be extreme manipulation, right? I know. My ex swore up and down, practically ate dirt, promising he'd changed. 6 months later, he was shacked up with someone new. They're all the same. Maybe. Not maybe. Definitely. Claire, you've gone through so much. Don't fold now. Court is in a week. I'm not folding. I'm just thinking. There's nothing to think about. He betrayed you. Period. Claire hung up and sat with the phone in her hands for a long time. Rachel was right. Betrayal is a fact that cannot be erased by remorse. You can forgive it, but you can never forget it. The crack would always be there between them, like an old surgical scar that aches when the weather turns bad. But then she remembered Penny's eyes. The way her daughter looked at her father when he read to her before bed. The way she grabbed his hand when they walked to the park. The way she said my dad with such profound pride, as if he were an actual superhero. Claire didn't know what to do. For the first time in 2 months, her flawless spreadsheet had crashed. She had calculated everything: the legal documents, the court dates, the child support, the division of assets. The only thing she had failed to calculate was her own heart. That evening, she opened Victoria Hayes' contact in her phone. She typed out a text. Victoria, is it possible to postpone the hearing? Then she deleted it, typed it again, deleted it again. Put the phone down. No, not yet. She would wait. She would watch. She had 10 more days to decide. 10 days where David would fix plumbing, read fairy tales, and go to therapy. And she would observe him, the way an auditor observes a ledger, patiently, attentively, refusing to trust anything until the debits matched the credits. But deep down, Claire already knew what she was terrified to admit to herself. She wanted the ledger to balance. 4 days before the court hearing, David's mother called. Claire saw the name Gail pop up on the screen and froze for a second. Over 10 years, her mother-in-law called her exactly 3 times a year. On Claire's birthday, on Thanksgiving, and on Penny's birthday. They weren't enemies, but they weren't close friends either. Gail was a reserved woman, the type who firmly believed that one should never meddle in another family's business, even if it's your own son's family. Claire respected her for that. Seeing her name pop up outside the usual schedule, Claire instantly knew. David had told her. Hello, Gail. Claire, hi. Are you free to talk? I am. A pause. Claire could hear her mother-in-law breathing heavily into the receiver, a faint wheeze in the background. She had asthma, and the autumn dampness always made it worse. I know what's going on. David came over and told me everything. Everything. Meaning what exactly? That he was seeing another woman. That you filed for divorce. That your hearing is in 4 days. Claire noted the phrasing. Was seeing another woman. Not a fling, not a mistake. Gail wasn't trying to minimize it. It was brutally honest. Claire, I am not calling to talk you into forgiving him. That is none of my business. I'm calling because I want to tell you one thing, and then I will never bring this up again. I'm listening. His father ran around on me too. Dave Sr., God rest his soul. David was 12 at the time. I found out, and I wanted to leave. I packed my suitcase. David stood in the hallway and cried. He didn't wail or throw a fit. He just cried silently, just tears running down his face. I stayed. Not for Dave. For my son. We lived together for 15 more years until his heart attack. For 15 years, I woke up next to a man I could never fully trust again, and every single day I wondered if I had made the right choice. Why are you telling me this? Because I never found the answer. But I want you to know, whatever decision you make, I will understand it. If you leave, I will not become your enemy. You are my granddaughter's mother, and that is more important to me than anything else. Claire swallowed hard. She had expected guilt trips, tears, accusations. You're destroying my son's family. Instead, she got something entirely different. Honesty. The bitter, adult honesty of a woman who had walked through the exact same fire and refused to pretend she had the magic answer. Thank you, Gail. Take care of Penny. No matter what happens. Her mother-in-law hung up. Claire stood in the middle of the living room with the phone in her hand, thinking about a 12-year-old David crying silently. A boy who watched his family fracture and carried that trauma inside him all these years. She had never known his father cheated. David had never told her. Apparently, there are things men bury so deep they forget where they hid them, but it didn't excuse anything. Claire shook her head, forcing the pity away. David knew exactly what it felt like to be a child in a broken home. He knew, and he did what he did anyway. That didn't make his actions less monstrous. It made them worse. Or maybe, conversely, maybe that was exactly why he broke, because he carried this defective model of a family inside him and didn't know how to operate a healthy one. Claire stopped herself. No. She wasn't a psychologist. It wasn't her job to excavate the roots of his childhood trauma. He had a licensed professional for that now, someone he paid $150 an hour to see every Wednesday. That evening, Claire picked Penny up from the dance studio. The lobby was packed with parents, smelling of sweat and kids' sneakers. Penny ran out, her face flushed, her ballet bun slightly messy, clutching a certificate to her chest. Mom! Mom, look! Miss Tanya gave me the certificate for Most Improved. She said I have real talent. Claire crouched down and hugged her daughter tightly. Great job, Sunshine. I am so proud of you. We have to show Dad. He promised he's coming to the winter showcase in December. He'll come. Claire froze for a second. The showcase in December, that was 2 months away. By that time, would Penny still have a family where Dad comes to her recitals? Of course he'll come, she said, hating herself for telling yet another lie. At home, Penny pinned the certificate to her bedroom wall, right next to a family portrait she had drawn a year ago. In the drawing, there were 3 figures: a mom with long hair, a dad who was the tallest, and Penny in the middle, holding both of their hands. Everyone was smiling. The sun in the corner was bright yellow, the sky was blue, and the grass was neon green. A world where everything was simple and right. Claire stared at that drawing for a long time, then closed the door and went to the kitchen. 3 days before court, Claire's mother arrived. Susan, a short, plump woman with perpetual anxiety in her eyes, showed up completely unannounced, carrying a tote bag full of homemade chocolate chip cookies and a jar of apple preserves, as if cookies and jam had the power to fix a shattered marriage. Though, in her worldview, baked goods truly were a cure-all. Mom, I asked you not to come, Claire said, opening the door. I didn't come for you. I came for my granddaughter. Susan marched into the house, shooting a rapid, assessing glance around the mudroom, 1 male coat on the rack instead of 2. A pillow and a folded blanket on the living room sofa. She understood everything instantly, but didn't say a word. Penny squealed with joy. Grandma meant party cookies, extra bedtime stories, and permission to stay up half an hour past her curfew. Susan hugged her granddaughter, stroked her hair, and looked over the little girl's head at her daughter. A look containing every unasked question in the world. Once Penny was asleep, they sat at the kitchen island. Susan poured tea, arranged the cookies on a plate, and waited. She knew how to wait. Claire had inherited that trait from her. Mom, don't start. I haven't even said anything yet. You don't need to. I know what you're thinking. No, you don't. Susan took a sip of her tea. You think I came here to talk you out of it, but I came here to help you. Whatever you decide. Claire looked at her mother. For the second time in a single day, she was hearing the exact same words from her mother-in-law and her own mother. 2 women who were not friends, who barely spoke to each other at holidays, were offering her the exact same grace. I will understand any decision you make. Mom, I don't know what to do. I was so sure. For a whole month, I was absolutely certain. The documents, the lawyer, everything is ready. But now he's fixing leaky faucets and reading bedtime stories to the kid. Yes, And he's going to therapy. How do you know that? He called me yesterday. Claire's head snapped up. David called you? Yes, he did. Can you imagine? First time he's ever called my cell in 10 years, Susan said. He told me, I have deeply wronged your daughter. I am doing everything in my power to fix it. But if she decides to leave, I will understand. Just please help me not lose Penny. Claire was silent. Her tea was getting cold. Claire, I don't know if he's being genuine or not. I've never been good at understanding men. Your father left when you were 4, and I've kept my distance from them ever since. But I will tell you this. When you were little, for years I was so angry at him. Angry that he abandoned us. That he didn't call. That his child support checks bounced half the time. And then I realized that the anger was eating me alive, and he didn't give a damn. So I stopped. I didn't forgive him. I just stopped being angry. Those are two different things. What are you getting at? I'm getting at the fact that your decision needs to come from a place of clarity, not from anger, and not from pity. You're angry, and you have every right to be. But if you divorce him out of pure spite instead of clarity, you'll regret it. And if you stay with him out of pity instead of clarity, you'll regret that too. Susan finished her cookie, wiped her hands with a napkin, and stood up. I'm going to sleep in Penny's room. Good night, sweetie. She left, leaving Claire alone. Claire sat at the kitchen island staring at the cold tea and the plate of cookies, feeling as if she were standing at a crossroads where every path vanished into dense fog. Anger or pity. Her mother was right. Neither was a solid foundation. She needed clarity. But clarity was a luxury Claire couldn't afford right now, because every time she tried to think clearly, two conflicting images smashed into her brain. David reeking of another woman's perfume, and David, sitting on the floor, reading a bedtime story, because Penny begged him to stay. The exact same man. Two truths, both completely real. The day before the court hearing, Claire did something she had never planned to do. She drove to Jessica's apartment. She had memorized the address easily from the text messages she read a month ago. Jessica had dropped a pin with the text, "Waiting for you at home." Claire had logged the address mechanically, the way she memorized tax codes. She hadn't thought she'd ever use it, but she woke up that morning with the distinct feeling that she was missing a piece of the puzzle. She had only seen this entire disaster from two angles, hers and David's. She hadn't heard the third side, and that was preventing her from thinking clearly. Jessica lived in a newer, upscale apartment complex on the edge of the city, a one-bedroom on the 9th floor. Claire rode the elevator up and stood in front of the door, gathering her courage. Then, she knocked. A girl in an oversized t-shirt and yoga pants opened the door. She was petite, thin, with a short bob and huge gray eyes. She looked younger than Claire had imagined. Or maybe everyone just looks younger without makeup. Jessica saw her and immediately understood who was standing in her hallway. You could tell by the way the blood drained from her face and how her knuckles went white gripping the door handle. "You're Claire." Not a question. A statement. "Yes. Can I come in?" Jessica silently stepped aside. The apartment was small and impeccably clean. A bookshelf, a small desk with a MacBook, potted African violets on the windowsill. Just a normal apartment belonging to a normal young woman. Claire didn't know what she had been expecting. Black lace lingerie hanging from the chandelier, framed photos of someone else's husband on the wall. Reality turned out to be far more mundane. "I didn't come here to make a scene," Claire said, sitting on the offered dining chair. "I just want to have an adult conversation." Jessica sat across from her. She folded her hands in her lap. Her fingers were trembling. "He ended it," she said quietly. "He called me and told me you found out. That's when it stopped." "When did it start?" Jessica looked down. "At the corporate retreat in June, we ended up sitting next to each other at the bar. He looked miserable. He drank more than usual. He told me he was exhausted, that no one at home listened to him or appreciated him. I listened. Later, we went outside so I could smoke, even though he doesn't smoke. We stood on the patio, and he suddenly said, 'You're the first person in a long time who makes me feel light.' And it just snowballed from there." Claire listened. Not a single muscle in her face twitched. She listened the way an attorney listens to a witness deposition, attentively, noting the details. Did you know he was married? Yes, from day one. And that he has a daughter. Jessica flinched and looked away at the violets on the windowsill. Yes, I knew. I'm not going to make excuses. It was wrong. I knew it from the beginning, but he seemed so unhappy, and I thought I could save him. Stupid, isn't it? Stupid, Claire agreed. No malice in her voice, just stating a fact. Did he talk about me? Not badly. He said you were a great wife and mother, that Penny was the light of his life. I used to ask him, then why are you here? He never answered. Claire felt something shift inside her. She had driven here looking for anger. She had wanted to see the enemy a brazen, home-wrecking predator. Instead, she found a terrified girl in sweatpants, growing violets on her windowsill, who fell in love with the wrong man and was now sitting in front of his wife with trembling hands. Did you love him? Claire asked. Jessica looked up. There were tears in her eyes. I thought I did. Now, I don't know. I think I loved the version of himself that he showed me, and he wasn't showing me his real self. He showed me the light version, fun, easygoing, no domestic chores, no real-world problems. That isn't love. That's escapism. Claire stood up. She had heard enough. In fact, she had heard more than she wanted to. I'm not going to apologize to you, Jessica said to her back. It would be an insult. But I want you to know, I quit my job at the firm. On my own. Claire turned around. He quit too. Jessica nodded, wiping a hand across her face. I know. They looked at each other. Two women connected by one man, whom he had betrayed in entirely different, yet equally painful, ways. Claire opened the door and walked out without saying goodbye. Not out of rudeness, she simply couldn't find any words appropriate for the situation. She sat in her SUV in the parking lot for 20 minutes, hands gripping the steering wheel, staring into nothing. Then she pulled out her phone and dialed her lawyer's number. Victoria, I want to postpone the hearing. A pause on the other end. Claire, are you certain? No. But I need more time. How much? A month? 2? I don't know. I can file a continuance. But it is my professional duty to warn you. The longer you drag out a divorce proceeding, the harder it is to finalize. Emotions cool off, resolve weakens. I have seen it happen hundreds of times. I understand. All right. I'll file the motion for a continuance. I'll call you when we get a new date. Claire put the phone down and started the engine. On the drive back, she stopped by the local park, the same park where she and David used to walk when they were dating. The bench by the duck pond, the old oak tree, feeding the mallards stale bread. She sat on that bench and stayed there a long time, until the autumn chill soaked through her coat. That evening, she said nothing to David. He came home at 7, ate dinner, read to Penny, and lay down on the basement couch. A totally normal evening. Susan had packed up and left that morning. She had left a pot of soup in the fridge and a sticky note on the counter. Claire, whatever you decide, I am here for you. Mom, Claire hid the note in the bottom drawer of her desk, the one that held old photo albums, Penny's finger paintings from preschool, and the dried, pressed daisies David had given her on their first date. A drawer of memories. She hadn't opened it in 2 years. She shut it quickly so she wouldn't have to look at it. Tomorrow was supposed to be the court hearing. Tomorrow, she was supposed to stand before a judge and state for the record that her marriage was irreparably broken. Instead, tomorrow would be a completely normal day. Breakfast, work, school, ballet, dinner. Another day where she would observe and think. Another day without an answer. But there was one thing Claire knew for a fact. The anger was gone. It had receded like floodwaters, leaving behind heavy, damp earth. Nothing was growing in that soil yet, but the toxic weeds had been washed away too. It was a first step. She just didn't know where the path was leading. A month passed, then another. Autumn faded into winter, and along with the first snowfall, something returned to the house that Claire couldn't quite put a name to. It was far from happiness. It wasn't forgiveness either. She still wasn't sure she was capable of that. Rather, it felt like an armistice. Fragile, cautious, like the first layer of ice on a pond that you're terrified to step on. David was still sleeping in the basement. Claire didn't invite him back to the master bedroom, and he didn't ask. New rules had been established between them, unwritten and unspoken. He cooked breakfast on the weekends. She let him pick Penny up from school twice a week. They communicated briefly, strictly business, without unnecessary words, like college roommates learning how to navigate a shared living space. But there were moments, tiny, imperceptible moments, like cracks forming in reverse, not destroying the foundation, but fusing it back together. One evening, Penny got sick. Her fever spiked to 102 degrees. She was burning up, fussy, and crying. Claire was running frantic laps between the thermometer, the children's Tylenol, and wet washcloths. David appeared in the doorway of the nursery, barefoot, wearing a wrinkled t-shirt. What happened? High fever. He didn't ask any more questions. He silently scooped Penny up into his arms, wrapped a heavy blanket around her, sat down in the rocking chair, and began to rock her. Claire went to the kitchen to make chamomile tea with honey. From down the hall, she could hear David's voice. He was singing softly, totally off-key, some old lullaby he apparently remembered from his own childhood. Penny quieted down, eventually falling asleep on his shoulder, her tiny fists gripping the fabric of his t-shirt. David sat in that chair for 3 hours, terrified to move a muscle and wake her. Claire stood in the doorway, watching them. His unshaven face, the dark shadows under his eyes, his daughter secured tightly in his arms. And suddenly, her mind flashed to that printed photograph, hidden in her desk drawer, David, holding a newborn Penny in the hospital. The exact same posture, the exact same protective grip, the exact same raw terror in his eyes, the primal fear of a father terrified for his child. 8 years had passed, but those arms held her just as tightly. She turned away, went back to the kitchen, and sat at the island. She sat there for a long time, listening to the silence of the house. David went to his therapy appointments every single Wednesday. He never missed a session. Claire knew, because she saw the charges hit their joint checking account. She still managed the finances, an accountant's habit. There were no other suspicious charges, no high-end steakhouses, no boutique jewelry stores, no hotel rooms, just groceries, gas, Penny's ballet tuition, and his therapist. Numbers don't lie. Claire trusted numbers far more than words. At his new job, David was making less money. Claire noticed because he stopped buying his $6 artisan lattes every morning. It used to be a non-negotiable daily ritual for him. Now, he drank Folgers from their old drip coffee maker and never complained. She didn't say anything about it. Neither did he. In December, it was time for Penny's winter showcase. The dance studio had rented out the auditorium at the local community center. Penny was dancing a waltz in a white tulle dress with a velvet ribbon in her hair. She looked incredibly serious and intensely focused. Claire sat in the third row, recording the performance on her iPhone. David sat in the same row, not next to her, just in the same row. There was one empty seat between them, acting as a demilitarized zone neither was willing to cross. When Penny's routine ended, the auditorium erupted in applause. The little girl took a bow, scanned the crowd until she found her parents, and positively beamed. She waved furiously with both hands. Claire waved back. So did David. And for a split second, for one microscopic fraction of time, their eyes met over the empty seat. Not as enemies, not as roommates, as two people who shared a living, breathing miracle, currently standing on a stage in a white dress. Claire quickly looked away, but that second lingered. It lodged under her skin like a splinter. After the recital, the three of them went to a diner. Penny chattered nonstop, inhaling chocolate chip pancakes and explaining how nervous she had been before the curtain went up. David listened, asked questions, and laughed. Claire drank her herbal tea and observed them. From the outside, anyone in that diner would have assumed they were a perfectly normal family. No one knew that the father was sleeping on a basement couch, that the mother had divorce papers sitting on hold at the courthouse, that between the pancakes and the laughter lay a massive canyon over which both adults were precariously balancing for the 3rd month in a row. That evening, after Penny was fast asleep, David walked into the kitchen. Claire was washing the dishes. He stepped up to the sink, picked up a dish towel, and began drying the plates. In total silence. They stood shoulder to shoulder, just like they used to in the early years of their marriage, when doing the dishes wasn't a chore, but a shared ritual. A time to decompress and talk about everything under the sun. "Thanks for coming to the recital," he said quietly. "She is my daughter. Where else would I be?" "Our daughter." Claire placed the last plate in the drying rack, wiped her hands on a towel, and turned to face him. "David, I postponed the court hearing, but I did not cancel it. I need you to know that I am still not ready to forgive you. I might never be ready." "I know. Then why are you standing here drying dishes?" He hung the dish towel on the oven handle and looked at her directly, openly. Without the frantic, panicked scrambling he had displayed in the very beginning. "Because I want to be here. Even like this. Even on the basement couch. Even if you ultimately decide that it's over. I want you to know that I am right here, and I am not going anywhere until you look me in the eye and tell me to leave." Claire didn't say a word. His words were correct. They were beautiful, even. But she had heard plenty of beautiful words over the last decade. "I will love you forever. You are the only one. We are a team." Words are just wind. She had stopped breathing that wind a long time ago, relying instead on hard data, but the data was speaking too. 3 months without a single slip-up, a new job with a pay cut, therapy every Wednesday, a fixed leaky faucet, an assembled shoe rack, weekend breakfasts, bedtime stories. Tiny, quiet actions that were stacking up in a column, exactly like entries in an accounting ledger. Debits, credits, balance. "I'll call Victoria tomorrow," she said. David froze. "I'll tell her I need an indefinite extension." He exhaled. It wasn't joy, it was pure, unfiltered relief. A tiny reprieve, not a victory. "Thank you." "Don't thank me. I'm not doing it for you." She walked into the master bedroom, lay down in the dark, and closed her eyes. For the first time in 3 months, she didn't think about divorce, and she didn't think about forgiveness. She thought about a third option, about the possibility that there might be a road that doesn't lead backward to the past and doesn't lead to a courthouse, but veers off in an entirely new direction. A place where you can start over. Not with a blank slate, there was far too much scribbled on their slate already, but turning to a new, clean page. She didn't know if she had the strength for it, but for the first time in a very long time, she wanted to try. Winter dragged on, the way it always does when you're waiting for something but you aren't entirely sure what it is you're waiting for. January passed in silent coexistence. February brought brutal freezing temperatures, another bout of the flu for Penny, and a conversation Claire never saw coming. Her daughter was recovering, sitting up in bed propped against pillows, surrounded by coloring books and colored pencils. Claire brought her a mug of hot tea with honey and sat down next to her. Penny was drawing a house, a large one with smoke curling out of the chimney, yellow glowing windows, and a bright red roof. Standing next to the house were 3 figures. "That's us," Penny said, not looking up from her coloring book. "Mom, are you and Dad getting a divorce?" Claire's breath caught in her throat. She stared at her daughter. At her bowed head, her thin fingers gripping a colored pencil, her stubborn chin that was a carbon copy of David's. She couldn't find the words. "Why do you ask that, baby?" "Chloe's mom and dad got divorced. Chloe told me that first her dad slept on the living room couch, then they yelled a lot, and then her dad moved out. Our dad has been sleeping on the couch downstairs for a really long time." Penny looked up. Her dark eyes were utterly serious. Piercing. Not a child's eyes at all. "Mom, is he going to leave?" Claire threw her arms around her daughter. She held her tight, the way you hug someone when there are no words left to say. Penny buried her face in Claire's shoulder and cried, quietly, without hysterics. Exactly the way a 12-year-old David had cried in a hallway, blocking his mother from leaving with a suitcase. History was repeating itself, and the realization seized Claire by the throat. "No," she said fiercely. "No one is going anywhere. We are going to figure this out." She didn't know if she was telling the truth or telling yet another lie. But her daughter stopped crying in her arms, and in that moment, that was far more important than the truth. That evening, after Penny had gone to sleep, Claire walked down to the basement. David was lying on the couch, reading something on his phone. When he saw her on the stairs, he sat up immediately and put the phone away. Penny knows, Claire said. Not the details, but she figured it out. David buried his face in his hands. The exact same gesture, palms pressing into his eyes, fingers rubbing his forehead. Only before, he used it to hide from uncomfortable conversations. Now, he was hiding out of sheer shame. She asked me if you were going to leave. And what did you say? Did you say no? He dropped his hands and looked at her. Claire, wait. Let me speak. Please. Don't interrupt. She nodded. Claire sat down in the armchair across from him. Between them sat a coffee table holding a mug of cold tea and the drawing Penny had abandoned earlier. The house with the yellow windows. The three figures. A family. For 4 months, I have been living with unsigned divorce papers sitting in your purse, he said. For 4 months, I wake up every morning and wonder, is today the day? Or maybe tomorrow? It is absolute torture. For me, for you, and for Penny, we can't keep doing this. If you want me to leave, I'll pack my bags tonight. I haven't forgiven you. I need you to understand that. What you did wasn't a scratch that's just going to scab over and heal. It was a compound fracture. The bone will fuse back together, but it will be misshapen. It will be different, and I will be different. And we, if we stay together, will be a completely different couple. I know. No, you don't know. You think that if I say, let's stay together, everything will just magically snap back to the way it was. It won't. The past is dead. I am not going to stay silent when I'm unhappy anymore. I am not going to pretend everything is fine when everything is falling apart. I am no longer going to be the convenient wife. You went looking for lightness and easy with Jessica. It was so easy. Well, it is never going to be easy with me again. Never. Are you prepared for that? David was silent. For a long time, Claire watched him carefully searching for the right words, and she waited, not rushing him. If he offered up some rehearsed, smooth, Hallmark card apology right now, she would stand up and walk away. Not just from the basement, but from this marriage. Forever. I don't need easy, he finally said. His voice was raspy, low. I need you. Exactly as you are. Angry, if you need to be. Cold, when I deserve it. I need you to tell me the brutal truth, even when it makes me sick to my stomach. Because when you stayed silent, and I stayed silent, that is exactly when our marriage rotted from the inside out. We both stayed quiet, Claire. Both of us. I am not absolving myself of the blame for what I did. But we both built that wall. Claire wanted to argue. She wanted to scream that it was all his fault, that he was the one who betrayed her. He was the one who lied. But she stopped herself, because somewhere deep down, beneath the bedrock of anger and resentment, she knew he was right. Not about the infidelity, the cheating was his fault alone, but the silence, the chasm of distance, the suffocating routine where they had lost track of one another. Two people built that. I am willing to try, she said, but I have conditions. Name them. We go to couples counseling. Together. Not your guy, not my guy. A new therapist for us both. Once a week, minimum of 6 months. No skipped sessions. Agreed. You are moving back into the master bedroom. But that does not mean everything is suddenly fixed. It means Penny stops being terrified that her father is moving out. Understand? Understood. And finally, if I ever smell another woman's perfume on your collar again, I will leave that exact same day. No conversations, no second chances, no dragging it through family court. I will take Penny, I will leave, and you will never see me again. David stood up. He closed the distance between them and stopped 1 step away from her chair. Claire looked up at his face, a face that had aged over the last few months. The gray at his temples that had spread noticeably. His eyes, which held no fear, no guilt, but something entirely new. Resolve. The quiet, adult resolve of a man who knows he has just been handed his final lifeline and has no right to let it slip through his fingers. I promise you, he said. Don't promise. Do it. He held out his hand, not to pull her into a hug, just an open palm, waiting. Claire stared at that hand. She saw everything it represented, how that hand had held a newborn Penny in the delivery room, how it had slid a wedding band onto her finger, and how it had caressed the cheek of another woman. All of it belonged to that single hand. Their entire life. She stood up. She didn't take his hand, but she didn't push it away, either. She walked past him, stopping at the bottom of the basement stairs. "You can bring your pillow and blanket up from the couch." And she walked upstairs. David stood alone in the basement for a moment. Then he slowly folded the fleece throw blanket, picked up his pillow, and followed her. The master bedroom was dark. Claire was lying on her side of the bed, facing the wall. He climbed into his side. Between them lay 12 inches of mattress, a distance that currently felt as vast as the Atlantic Ocean. "Good night," he said. "Good night," she replied. Silence. From the room down the hall, they could hear Penny's steady, rhythmic breathing. Outside the window, snow was falling. Silently, heavily, blanketing the suburban streets in white, like a brand-new, clean sheet of paper. Claire lay with her eyes open, listening to her husband's breathing. Jagged at first, then smoothing out. He wasn't asleep. She knew it. He knew that she knew it. Both of them were silent, but this was a different kind of silence. It wasn't a brick wall anymore. It was a bridge. A fragile, swaying rope bridge suspended over a canyon, and they had a very long walk ahead of them. Claire reached her hand backward across the mattress and brushed his palm, just with one finger, her pinky. The absolute lightest touch, almost nothing, but David froze. And then, carefully, barely daring to breathe, he hooked his pinky finger around hers. They lay there in the dark, tethered together by their pinkies, like two children sealing a promise. And it wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't full reconciliation. It wasn't a return to the past. It was a beginning. Small, quiet, and fragile, like the first snowdrop flower pushing its way up through the frozen, hardened earth. The next morning, Penny woke up first. She peeked into the master bedroom, saw her mom and dad sleeping in the same bed, smiled to herself, quietly pulled the door shut, and padded down to the kitchen on her own to pour a bowl of Cheerios. She was a big girl. She understood how things worked. And outside the window, the snow continued to fall, covering tracks, blanketing the lawns, burying the dirt beneath a pristine white layer. It didn't erase the dirt. It just covered it. When spring came, the snow would melt, and everything would be exposed to the sun again. But spring was a long way off. Today, it was clean. Today, it was quiet. Today, they could begin again.